We have a meeting with Iran on Thursday, so we're going to wait till Thursday.
And what's the main impediment to getting a deal?
Well, they're just asking for things that you can't do. They don't want to give up what they have to give up. You can't have enrichment. We want just the opposite. And so far, they're not there. I hate to say that because the alternative is a very, very dire one, but they're not there. They have given us their thoughts on the deal, and I said, you know, it's just not acceptable.
President Trump there saying that he will resume nuclear talks with Iran this week, reaffirming the regime cannot enrich uranium and ultimately get a nuclear bomb. This after the United Nations nuclear watchdog says that it cannot independently verify whether Tehran's nuclear program is, quote, entirely peaceful. The president also spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone over the weekend on a wide range of topics, including Iran. Watch.
How did your phone call go with Prime Minister Netanyahu? You just mentioned Iran. Did you discuss Iran? Did you discuss the Gaza war?
Yeah, we discussed a lot of things, and it went very well, very smooth. We'll see what happens. We just spoke about Iran. I think you should negotiate this. You might be better. This could have been the idea of the day. We'll have Dara get up and negotiate. They are good negotiators, but they're tough. Sometimes they can be too tough. That's the problem. So we're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death. And we've told them that, and I've told them that, and I hope that's the way it works out. But
joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst. He is chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with us. General, great to see you. Your reaction to these Iran talks and what you think is how this plays out?
Yeah, well, certainly the president is very forthcoming about what's taking place with these talks, and it's not surprising that Iran's negotiators speaking for the Ayatollah are playing hardball here. I mean, a couple of things is motivating Iran. They want to delay these negotiations and drag them out as much as possible. To get the JCPOA deal, the so-called nuclear deal with the Obama administration, they were in negotiations for almost 2 years. And Obama went in there with the same proposals we have: dismantle your nuclear program, take it down, stop your aggressive behavior in the region, stop sponsoring terrorism, and also stop your ballistic missile program and destroy the missiles that could deliver. That was their going-in conditions. They gave up on all of those conditions after several months of tough negotiations by Iran and produced a deal that was fundamentally flawed, and President Trump got out of it in 2018. These are the same negotiators that we're dealing with now, and that's what they're trying to achieve, drag this out. Why does the Ayatollah want to drag it out? Because Israel destroyed so much of their air defense systems. They are trying to recover those air defense systems as quickly as possible. I think in his own mind, Maria, where the Ayatollah is a supreme leader, and he takes a much harder stand than the people who are actually negotiating for him, I think where he is, he's not going to dismantle his nuclear enterprise. He will not do that. And that's our major condition. And that means what? That means he's willing to accept an airstrike, and he thinks he can recover some of that airstrike if he can get those air defense systems in there and be able to build on what is left from that and still acquire a nuclear weapon at some future date. Wow. I kind of suspect that that's kind of where he is, which is quite significant if that's the stand he's taking.
Yeah,
so
quite
I think the president talking to Netanyahu was they probably had a very rich discussion about where the president is in the negotiations, and also they likely discussed the alternative. If Iran is not going to come around, and what would be the timing of that, and what they intend to do together or separately. And
the president has been alluding to such a threat, right, for a long time now, So we'll have to see how this plays out, but it looks like the big event is yet to come. Meanwhile, let me get your take on China, because the DOJ has announced charges against a third Chinese scientist from Wuhan, accused of smuggling biological materials into America. 4 packages of the pathogen were sent to the University of Michigan both last year and this year. The scientist was detained when flying back to Detroit on Sunday. Authorities say that she made false statements about the previously shipped packages, General, Of course, this is on top of what we learned last week, where, a couple, Chinese nationals, were charged with conspiracy and smuggling a dangerous biological pathogen into the United States. And, they talked about hiding it in their shoes, et cetera. General, your reaction?
Yeah, well, certainly we're not surprised by this, I think, because China is conducting the most comprehensive penetration of our society since we were formed 250 years ago, wow. 249 years now. And we've never seen anything quite like this. And it's so comprehensive. Cyber espionage penetrating our critical infrastructure. And what our intelligence people are telling us publicly is that they're remaining in that infrastructure in the sense that they're sleeping inside those capabilities, telecommunications, food supply, pharmaceutical, drugs, transportation, and the list goes on. And in the event there's conflict with China in the Pacific, they would attempt to defeat the American people at home and break their will to support the war. And here we have a biological pathogen smuggling into the country that could attack our agriculture and ultimately our food source. And I think this is more exploration than anything else to detect and see how they can penetrate and how comprehensive this could be for the future. So, yeah, I mean, we are target one for the Chinese communists, and we have got to make sure we have a comprehensive defense in this country against it.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a fishing expedition just like COVID, right? I mean, the same thing with COVID. Let's see what COVID does when we unleash that or when we cover it up. And then there's fentanyl. And then you mentioned, this, like huge, in many different ways, penetrating America. A Chinese aircraft carrier reportedly conducting drills hundreds of miles south of Japan's main island as well. It's sort of China against the world, but the U.S. is target one. One of China's 2 operational aircraft carriers and at least 7 other Navy ships were seen east of Iwo Jima for the first time over the weekend, General. So there's that. I mean, my question is, I don't understand how we can have talks on trade with our counterparts in China, today in London. How are we talking about business and the regular course of business when you have to trust your partner on the other side, when in fact they're undermining the United States at every turn, trying to kill American citizens?
Yeah, well, there can't be much trust, certainly, dealing with the Chinese Communist Party in terms of how they suppress and oppress their own people, and certainly their assertive and aggressiveness, not only in the region, but as we just pointed out, inside of our own country. Not much trust can be here, to be frank. I know the president tries valiantly to have a decent relationship with President Xi so we can make some progress, but I think the president's eyes are wide open. Everybody in our government's eyes are wide open here, right, in terms of what China's clear intent is. Remember, they have stated very clearly what they're about. They want to dominate and control the Indo-Pacific region, and they want to replace the United States as the world's global leader. That is their ambitions, and they are about that every single day. Right. And the aircraft carrier in the region operating there is intimidation and coercion of Japan, certainly, and Taiwan, and also the Philippines. But it's also practicing for a potential, as a rehearsal for potential operations in the area if they're going to blockade Taiwan or if they're going to take more aggressive military action in the South China Sea. So we have to see it for what it is. It's part of China's aggression in the region to dominate and control it.
Yeah, which includes their reunification with Taiwan. And, what did Xi Jinping say when they were celebrating the Communist Party's anniversary, 100th anniversary a couple of years ago? Anybody who gets involved in our reunification will get their heads busted to dust. I mean, that was a quote. That was a quote in his comments. It's just extraordinary, General. I so appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you about it, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, love talking as always, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, General. General Jack Keith. Joining me now is the mayor of Miami, Florida, Francis Suarez. Mayor, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. And we wanted to get your take as a man who is leading a successful city of Miami, what you see taking place in Los Angeles. What's your reaction?
It's very sad. This is the United States of America. We believe in law and order. We believe that people have the right to protest, but they should do it in a peaceful way. I remember during the George Floyd protests in the city, we had two very fundamental rules. Number one, if you hurt anybody or if you damage any property or business, you're going to jail. And it was a zero tolerance policy. And because of that, we had very little arrests. And our police department had very, very few confrontations. But you can never, ever allow things to get disordered because once you do that, it sort of slides into anarchy and then it builds on itself. And of course, it makes absolutely perfect sense that the president would step in. He is the president of the United States. The last thing he wants to see is images like the ones you're showing right now on the screen in the country that he runs. And it's, again, it's embarrassing as a leader of a city or as a governor to see that kind of lawlessness in your jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are getting reports that there is something scheduled nationwide on Saturday, and you've been seeing pockets of rioting in other big cities. Can you give us a sense of what's happening in Miami? Are you expecting any rioters there in Miami?
We've seen some chatter and we've received some images online about some sort of protest on Saturday. I've had multiple conversations with my police chief, with my COO, to make sure that we are ready, and they've assured me that we are. Like I said, we have experience with these kinds of things. We're a big city, but we're also a city that epitomizes, law and order. And we're a city that will always make sure that the peace of all of our residents is being enjoyed, because you don't have a few people, some of which oftentimes are paid or are intentionally trying to create chaos and sow chaos through the kinds of organizations that do that on a regular basis, Antifa, et cetera. We want to make sure that those people don't get a foothold, that they're not able to rabble-rouse and get other people excited, because that's their objective. What happened in Miami during George Floyd was the first night they tried those kinds of things. We clamped down. I think we had 50 arrests the first night. And then from that point forward, I think we had 5 arrests on average a day. So, once you demonstrate that you are not going to tolerate, this kind of anarchy, that you're not going to tolerate lawlessness, and that you're doing something about it, and that you're prepared, you'll see the results, and those people will go away and they'll go somewhere where they think they can have more success.
I mean, look at some of the people that the administration has already arrested. The mainstream media likes to put on this act as if President Trump doesn't want immigration, as opposed to what he's fighting, which is illegal immigration and actual criminality. I mean, some of the people that we've got on this list, a Vietnamese national, known gang member, convicted already of second-degree murder, arrested in 1994 after participating in cold-blooded murder. You've got another from Mexico, dangerous weapons, and he's armed, already convicted of child molestation. A Filipino national with convictions for rape, assault, burglary, theft, convictions for sex with a minor, convictions for domestic violence, hit and run, previously arrested for willful cruelty to a child, convictions for burglary, possession of stolen property. I mean, the list is long here, but these are the people who have been arrested in Los Angeles just recently. So I'm trying to understand, who is actually rioting? Are these people who came into the country illegally, or do you think that this is a mix of American citizens as well?
The primary role of any public official, from the president on down to a mayor, is to make sure that your city, your state, or your country is safe. That is our number one goal. In fact, in the city of Miami, we are right now on pace to have the lowest homicide in recorded history. So since we started recording homicides in the 1940s, so it is literally the safest year on record today in the city of Miami. So that is our number one goal. Obviously, after that, you try to take care of everyone economically, make sure that everyone has, affordable housing, and make sure that you have low homelessness. We're an 11-year low in homelessness. But what the president is doing is, he's making sure that Americans are safe. I think the other part that doesn't get discussed enough is the tragedy of illegal immigrants that are trafficked or part of human trafficking rings, and also that they're exploited. What happens if you're an illegal immigrant right now is obviously you are at the mercy of whoever you're working for, and that person can exploit you. And so that's also something that doesn't get discussed enough, unfortunately. And so the very people that are defending these illegal immigrants are often hurting them by not talking about some of these issues that impact them in a way that's not to their benefit. And I think the president right now is obviously focused, understandably, on the tax bill, and I think that's his number one priority, as well it should be, because that's going to propel the economy of the country. But after that, I could totally see the president pivoting to find a way to solve the immigration reform issue and create something that's good for the country, that's good for our national security, and that's good for our economic well-being long term.
Yeah, I mean, the president just posted a few minutes ago on Truth Social, Mr. Mayor, and here's what President Trump just wrote. If I didn't send in the troops to Los Angeles the last 3 nights, that once beautiful and great city would be burning to the ground right now, much like the 25,000 houses burned to the ground in L.A. Due to an incompetent governor and mayor. Incidentally, the much more difficult, time-consuming and stringent federal permitting process is virtually complete on these houses, while the easy and simple city and state permits are disastrously bungled up and way behind schedule. They're a total mess, he writes. And the president just posted this. Mr. Mayor, if you also have dealt with illegal migration in Miami. I know you've got lots of people illegally coming through from Cuba. Is there something that you would recommend be done in Los Angeles on a mayoral level? Because Karen Bass has so far just criticized President Trump.
Well, criticizing the president is definitely not going to solve the problem. That's for sure. Yeah. I think you have to take responsibility. You have to take ownership. As a mayor, your number one responsibility is to make sure that you're prepared for these kinds of incidents. And then when they happen, that you can lead through them. Make sure that, your police feels empowered, that they feel supported, and that whatever sort of flare-ups there are throughout the city, you quell them immediately, and you make sure that they don't get out of control, which is what we're seeing, unfortunately, in the city. And unfortunately, the president has been forced to act, right? Because he doesn't want to see one of the major cities in America burned to the ground.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, you were with President Trump for his very successful Middle East trip. Since you've been floated as a possible candidate for the next ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Tell me about that trip, and would you accept that position? Should the president want you to do it?
I think it was a master class by the president. I called him the peacemaker in chief or the deal maker in chief, because he was creating these economic deals that inure to the benefit of our country, and also focusing on peace by lifting the sanctions in Syria and focusing on making sure that he strengthens relationships in the Middle East in a moment that's so critical. People often forget his Abraham Accords that set the stage for long-term peace in the Middle East. And so for me, what I've said is I've collaborated with all the Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Israel, Qatar, UAE, and particularly Saudi. But I was very blessed to create relationships at the highest levels in Saudi Arabia and bring one of the most prominent conferences in the world, the FII conference, to Miami. That's right. Where we've had it for 3 years. The president opened the FII conference in Miami just this year, so he gave us a great tip of the cap for what we're doing in the city. We announced a Ministry of Investment office from Saudi Arabia in Miami. We're working on direct flights. We're working on a consulate, and we're working on a PIF office in the city as well. So we're collaborating very, very well with Saudi. What I've said on what you're talking about is, look, I trust the president to make whatever he thinks is the best decision for the country. He's done a phenomenal job. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, has done a magnificent job. By the way, he's a Miamian. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, another Miamian, doing a phenomenal job for the president. Also, double duty as National Security Director. So, we got a couple of Miamians that are already in the area doing great work. So I will obviously be at the will of whatever the president's pleasure is.
Well, and also all of this that you're talking about, on top of all the work that you've done in terms of creating Miami to be this technology hub. So many companies wanting to replicate what's going on in Silicon Valley right there in Miami. So congrats to you. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you again. Thank you, sir.
Most people estimate that over the next 10 years, the United States will add about $2 trillion a year, $20 trillion in debt. The savings, if you don't think the taxes or the tax cuts will cause a reduction in revenue, which I can accept that, and you say, well, the spending cuts are $1.5 trillion. That means instead of borrowing $20 trillion, we'd borrow $18.5 trillion. So the spending cuts are not nearly enough. The example of the explosion of debt is awful and not to be commended. We should be giving them very limited tranches of debt expansion and make them prove to us that they are good with money. But by no means should we give them $5 trillion and say, oh, just keep doing what you're doing. They have a terrible record, so they need more restraint and more oversight, not less.
That was Senator Rand Paul telling Maria on Sunday Morning Futures he remains opposed to the big, beautiful bill, but may consider Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson's plan of a two-step process. House Ways and Means Committee Chair Jason Smith also on SMF. Here's what he says would happen if that became a reality.
Ron Johnson from Wisconsin also was with us last week and over the weekend with me again. And he is insisting that this has to be in two bills, that it's just too much in one bill. How would that fly in the House after you've already passed this?
Maria, it would be dead on arrival. Rubber has hit the pavement. The people and the President of the United States, they want action, Maria. We delivered out of the House the largest tax cut in U.S. history, the largest cut to mandatory spending of $1.69 trillion in U.S. history, the most significant welfare reforms in U.S. history, and also the largest one-time investment in border security.
Joining me now is Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. He's a member of the House Oversight and Financial Services Committee's Congressman. I want to get your thoughts on that. And just a reminder here that Ron Johnson is somebody that said that he wants to go back to 2019 spending levels. Maybe that's a fantasy at this point in the world that we're in. But the Wall Street Journal points out that, and this is kind of where the rift is with the senators, that GOP senators' competing demands risk pulling the Trump mega bill apart, writes the Wall Street Journal. And whether it's Medicaid or green tax credits, business deductions, there's a lot of senators with a lot of changes they want to make to your bill. Your reaction?
My reaction is that Republicans need to decide what we really want to do. Do we want to have the president's tax policy, which the House did pass, which is the best tax policy the nation's ever had, while also taking care of the future financial outlook of the country? And so we have competing interests, amongst senators, but we have competing interests amongst House members. Let's be clear. I got House members who sent a letter over to the Senate saying they wanted to weaken some of the provisions in the Green New Deal tax credits. They want them to go longer, not have them be shorter or eliminate them altogether. Here's the truth. We simply can't afford them. I have members of the House, along with members of the Senate, who don't want to go further with respect to actually reforming Medicaid so that the federal government actually has the right policy where we treat pregnant women, poor children, and poor senior citizens better than able-bodied adults. Currently, the United States treats able-bodied adults better than pregnant women. That is a fact. So I don't think we're going back to two bills. I agree with Jason Smith, but the reality is that if the Senate sends back a bill that cuts more money, that will be well received in the House by many members, probably except for about 14. And so this is the problem that we have. It's about the future financial outlook of America. That's what we got to put forward. That's what Ron John and Rand Paul and many others are arguing for. The president's tax policy is amazing tax policy. We're going to get all that stuff done.
Well,
but Republicans, both House and Senate, have a major question to ask themselves. What matters more, re-election prospects or the future fiscal outlook of the country?
Well, and that is the conversation that comes up as a backdrop to all of this, or a side note, whatever you want to call it, is that, if things don't go the way for some Republicans that are in vulnerable districts, think of Mike Lawler of New York, their point is that the Republicans are going to lose control of the House after the 2026 midterms. And, it obviously, say what you will about the CBO. There's a lot of debate about their estimates, but they're saying this would add $2.4 trillion to the deficit over a decade. Again, there's a lot of debate about that. But you mentioned something about Medicaid, and I want to ask you about this because Senator Rick Scott was on Fox News Sunday, and he points out Florida, your state, that Florida is among one of the 10 states that did not accept Medicaid for low-income childless, able-bodied adults. Remember, they gained coverage back in 2010 under the Affordable Care Act. And Rick Scott said, look, we didn't accept that because in Florida, we believe in fiscal responsibility. Senator Rick Scott, one of the biggest critics right now of the big, beautiful bill. Your reaction?
Look, I agree with Senator Scott. In Florida, we did not expand Medicaid. And let's make sure we get the language correct. What Barack Obama did is he expanded the welfare state to include able-bodied adults. Those same able-bodied adults could have gotten employer-provided health care coverage. And so what the whole plan of Obamacare was to bring single-payer health care to the United States. That was the plan. They didn't have the votes in the Senate to be able to do it. And frankly, we're not going to single-payer. But we've created a serious problem. In Florida, if you're an able-bodied adult, you are not on Medicaid. But in California, in New York, in Illinois, you are. So the question is, what is the better public policy? Is it taking care of poor women, pregnant women, poor kids, and actually favoring them? Or is it favoring able-bodied adults in Medicaid who can actually go to work? And I think that what we need to do is follow the Florida model. Frankly, the whole country should follow the Florida model. But we should follow the Florida model and say, listen, we are going to prioritize people who are truly in need when it comes to public services. That's what needs to happen. And it would save the United States close to $1 trillion over a decade.
What is the latest on your run for governor of Florida, and what is your vision for Florida?
Well, first of all, we have a great state. Governor DeSantis has done a tremendous job. And I was listening to your segment earlier about what's going on in California. There's a reason why something like that would never happen in our state. We've had great governors in our state. My mission is to continue that and make sure that we are a law and order state. We are the free state, but it's also about diversifying our economy, making Florida the financial hub of the world, making sure that children are proficient in core subject matter, that we change the metrics instead of just being at grade level, now being at proficiency. Those are the things that we're going to be looking at going forward in Florida if I'm successful in my race for governor. But we have the best state in the country, and we're not going to look back. We're going to continue to lead and continue to take Florida to higher heights.
As we move into a new week right now, before you go, Congressman, just a quick reaction from you. What is your message to your colleagues on the Senate side who are about to get into some very, likely going to be some very contentious negotiations? And what is your message to Senator Thune right now, who's going to have to do what Mike Johnson did, and that, of course, is rally the troops?
My number one message is we got to cut spending. We just simply have to. And it's not just in the one beautiful bill. It's also in the appropriations packages. The president put out a budget earlier for discretionary spending. My read of it, it cuts about $163 billion. We need, in year one, we need to follow the president's lead. What Senator Johnson is talking about, going back to 2019 spending levels pre-COVID, that's not a pipe dream. We can do that. The problem is in Washington, frankly, the Democrats want to spend more money, and we're having a disagreement amongst Republicans. We need to cut as much spending as we can. Budget reconciliation is an opportunity to do that. And if you look at the Treasury bond yields, the thing that they charge us to borrow money, they're going up. And if the Treasury bond yields go up on the United States government, that means credit rates for businesses, for families, for individuals, they're going to go up as well. Everything is based on the 10-year. The 10-year going up is bad for Americans. It's bad for the working poor. Washington has to cut spending. So my message to the Senate, cut spending. Let's do the right thing. Let's do it now, and we'll win elections as a result.
Congressman Byron Donalds, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Come back anytime, sir. Thank you.
A third Chinese scientist has been charged with smuggling biological materials into the U.S., this time coming from Wuhan. Katie McFarland is here with me now. I have to ask you, I've asked you before, I'll ask it again. Does Xi Jinping know about this?
Absolutely. Look, it's a total surveillance society. They know where you go, they know which subway you get on. They know what you're having for dinner. They know everything about everybody in China. It is a total surveillance society.
But we must know.
The thought that anybody is coming here by accident on their own initiative, no. They are coming here at the direction of their government.
But we must know something about their operation because we stopped them at the border. We found them. We discovered all three of them. So we know what's going on, don't we?
Yeah, but how many got away when we weren't looking at the border, when we had an open border? You have to wonder who else has gotten in. Look, I look at this and say, you know, Sun Tzu is the famous Chinese philosopher of thousands of years ago, and Xi Jinping worships him. Sun Tzu said the way you win, the supreme way you win, is to defeat your enemy before you fight. You don't have to fight. So what are they doing? Just add up connect the dots. TikTok. They're trying to infiltrate the minds of our kids, right? Fentanyl, they're trying to kill our kids. They've got all of these various viruses that are coming. So the Wuhan COVID was at a Chinese Army weapons lab. That's what the weapons lab was at Wuhan. And so they're doing all of these different things in subtle ways that we can't really grab our eye. I mean, we think a war is you fight with weapons. Yeah. Donald Trump thinks a war is when you use trade. And that's really revolutionary for Americans. The Chinese, they think war is when you use all the other stuff. Spy balloons, drone satellites, spying. That's all war for them.
But this reminds me when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, looking at the Soviet Union. All things Soviet Union were wrong. They're trying to get us in every possible aspect. They were the enemy. Is that China now?
Yeah, but they're better at it. I mean, we now find in retrospect that the Soviet Union, we thought they were having these great weapon systems. We thought they were doing this. We thought they were doing that. And it turns out they really were, you know, it was an empty shell. They were a weapons factory, and that was about it. China, on the other hand, is an economic competitor. It's a peer competitor, not just in weapon systems, but in technology and in trade and all the other things. So that's why it's a far more serious adversary than we had during the Cold War.
And now they're competing seriously militarily.
Yes.
They've got a new aircraft carrier, I think, that's doing exercises just south of Japan. That's meant to wrest control of the Pacific away from the United States. Are they going that far?
They want us out of the Western Pacific, and they want us, back to Hawaii, maybe even back to San Francisco, because we protect trade in the entire region. So one of the reasons China's so crazy for Taiwan, not just because of the ethnic Chinese history stuff, not just because of the microprocessors, but because of the strategic situation of Taiwan. If you control the military in Taiwan, if China has Taiwan as a military, then they control the entire region. Japan, Korea, Philippines, Indonesia. Then China projects power in the whole Western Pacific.
I want you to listen to what Trump had to say about his call with Netanyahu. Roll that tape.
How did your phone call go with Prime Minister Netanyahu? You just mentioned Iran. Did you discuss Iran? Did you discuss the Gaza war?
Yeah, we discussed a lot of things, and it went very well, very smooth. We'll see what happens. We're trying to do something with a country we just spoke about, Iran. They are good negotiators, but they're tough. Sometimes they can be too tough. That's the problem. So we're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death. And we've told them that, and I've told them that, and I hope that's the way it works out.
Wait a second. There's nothing going on with Putin in Ukraine. He's still attacking. There's nothing going on in Iran. They're still wanting to refine their uranium. At some point, our president, doesn't he have to do something?
Yeah, and he said, I think they're tapping me along. In other words, they're playing out the clock, whether it's Iran in negotiations, whether it's Hamas on the prisoners and the hostages, whether it's China on trade, whether it's Russia and Ukraine. At some point, President Trump is going to have to make good when he says, okay, I've had enough, and then I'm going to take strong and decisive action. It almost doesn't matter where he takes strong and decisive action, but he needs to do it in one place, because then everybody else says, oh, wow, this is not Joe Biden. This is Donald Trump. He's serious. We can't tap him along any longer.
So if he does something...
I would do it in Iran. If I was advising him, I would say Iran is your best bet.
But what would you do with Iran? Sanctions on that?
Yeah, secondary sanctions. I mean, I would say to the mullahs, secondary sanctions, we are going to do what we did in the first term. We are going to just crush you economically, which we could do pretty quickly with secondary sanctions. We would also then encourage the Iranian people, who it's a large population, very savvy, young population. They don't love the mullahs. And every 10 years or so, they go to the streets and have a, insurrection. And the mullahs always put it down. And Obama and Biden, they always sided with the mullahs. Don't side with the mullahs. Let the Iranian people take things into their own hands. And then look aside if Israel says, okay, time to go. We need to do something militarily. We don't need to do militarily, but they could do something militarily.
It's fascinating. Katie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. Our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before. We will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Joining me now is the man who was sitting behind former President Bill Clinton. That is former House Speaker, former Georgia Congressman, and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Newt, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. We ran that clip so that we could show you sitting behind President Clinton, Mr. Speaker. And boy, what a change we've heard from Democrats from January of 1995 to January 2025.
Look, it's very hard to explain why the Democratic Party has lost its mind. And there's no other way to explain it. As you know, I just have a new book out, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. And part of that book is about the very fact that somehow the Democratic Party has gotten wedded to a series of issues that most Americans think are crazy. You're watching it right now. Governor Newsom had a great chance to do what Bill Clinton would have done, move to the center, be for whatever it took to stop the riots, be for law and order. Instead, he sided with the illegal immigrants who are running around waving the Mexican flag and burning cars, and decided to attack Trump, which is a dead losing issue with most Americans. And you see this happen again and again on issue after issue. You know, boys and girls locker rooms, men and women's sports, the whole question of whether or not teachers could brainwash a second or third grade student and never tell their parents. There are a whole series of these things where the Democrats are just literally so alien from most Americans that you're seeing them shrink. There have been over 1 million people change their registration since the election, from Democrat to Republican. It's an amazing migration.
And you write in the book, Trump's Triumph, about how President Trump zeroed in on the very issues that matter to the American people. Whereas you've got the Democrats talking about fringe issues, we're watching it in real time as we watch cars on fire and rioting in Los Angeles. And yet, according to the Democrats, there's nothing to see here, Newt. Watch this.
What's happening in Los Angeles is that most people are peacefully exercising their rights.
Those tensions have now risen. But we also saw yesterday peaceful protests.
Unfortunately, our people that are hijacking this for their own cause, but for the most part have been peaceful.
There was no violence. I was on the street. I know.
I mean, you know, Maxine Waters says that there was no chaos, that there was no violence. Newt, Mr. Speaker, we're seeing cars on fire and they're throwing rocks at police.
Well, this is the amazing thing, frankly, because the propaganda media is so often anti-Trump. It's very rare you get this kind of a breakthrough, but the hard news is so powerful that even all the networks are now carrying it. And what do you see? You see people who are deliberately violating the law, people who are attacking those who enforce the law, people who are burning cars, running around waving foreign flags. I mean, these are folks who want to conquer California. They don't just want to immigrate to it. They want to change it decisively. And the Democrats are so confused, they're describing a fantasy world. Every single Democrat who says it's a peaceful demonstration, just show them the video of the cars burning, the fact that Waymo, for example, has cut off service because of fear for its cars, the number of people who are trying to hurt federal law enforcement. And let's be clear, this is ultimately about the ability of the United States government to enforce the law.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are siding with the criminals against the U.S. government.
Yeah, and you write in Trump's Triumph, your new book, about how, unfortunately, President Trump was attacked, and they didn't want a disruptor. I mean, you go back to 1995 when you were able to do the contract with America, and you were able to come together and bring together Republicans with Democrats to actually come up with legislation that impacted American people's lives positively. The Senate right now is working on a rewrite of President Trump's big, beautiful bill. House Republican Conference Chair Lisa McClain was with me yesterday on this program, and she told me when she's expecting to get the bill back. Watch this. Do you have an expectation as far as when you'll get it back in the House after the Senate makes its changes?
What we're hearing right now is we'll get it back the last week in June, in time for us to get it passed by July 4th. Yeah, there are some family squabbles, but I think we've seen this movie before. So I'm optimistic that we're going to get this done by July 4th.
So, Newt, what do you want to say about this big, beautiful bill and whether or not we're going to see some serious changes happening from the Senate side? By the time it gets back to the House side, do you worry that that will alienate the support that's already there for the bill?
Well, look, in a sense, what you're doing is you're having the conference during the Senate markup. And I give Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Thune a lot of credit here. They're working to try to get a bill which could come out of the Senate, be acceptable to the House, probably by a 2 or 3 vote margin, and go to the White House to be signed. It's very hard work. I mean, frankly, the Founding Fathers wanted it to be very hard work. It's a huge bill, but the Democrats who are voting in effect for a tax increase, I don't know how they're going to go home and defend their position that they were willing to have the largest tax increase in history, and they voted for it as by opposing this bill. This is an important bill. It is a key, I think, to the Republican future, and it's a key for the American people. If this bill goes through, the economy is going to boom. The American people will have more money in their pockets, more jobs, and you'll see a skyrocketing level of investment that will make the next few years genuinely a Trump boom. That's also, by the way, why the Democrats are so bitterly opposed.
Yeah, which is also what you write in the book as far as the president's priorities. Congrats on Trump's triumphs, Newt. Mr. Speaker, good to see you as always, sir. Thank you.
Joining me now is Caroline Downey, National Review staff writer, Paul Morrow, Fox News contributor and former NYPD inspector, and Emily Compagno, co-host of Outnumbered and author of the wonderful book, Under His Wings. Emily, I go to you first because I know we're watching this on TV. I'm not breaking any new ground in the narrative, except I believe this is a global event. He is sending a signal of toughness, law, order, sovereignty, safety. Let all these dictators around the world see just how tough Donald Trump can be. That's the way I see this.
And the message delivery is more acute, in my opinion, because, for example, just yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of Seattle's East Precinct being fully taken over for 23 days. So the globe has seen what happened.
Was that one of these Soviets that they set up? They literally called them Soviets, as I recall. Council, old communist councils.
Yeah, comrades. It was the Chaz and the Summer of Love, remember?
Right.
So in that summer, we also saw a precinct in Minneapolis that burned to the ground upon failure to bring in the National Guard on time. So the point is, well received now, that this is what happens when you answer the call immediately. And don't take it from us, right? The LA police chief himself said, we are overwhelmed. That's the cue for resources to augment that. That's the point of the Federalist structure. And I note, too, that anyone who is arguing this, who is arguing bringing in federal resources, have no problem bringing in federal resources to augment during crises of economic stature, of natural disasters, then federal. So why isn't federal help okay when you are dealing with basic immigration enforcement and a zero tolerance of violence on the streets, cop cars and the like?
Right, that's key, zero tolerance. But I would just say these dummies in California didn't do a thing with the fires either.
True.
I mean, it just took them quite some time to do it. I mean, it's really a political malfeasance, but just bad management in general, and it's going to destroy the party. But Comrade Paul Morrow, thank you for coming here. Because I think it's interesting, the relationship, Emily touched on it, what's it, McDonald's, the chief's name? Yeah. And he's, the President, Trump himself had tweeted, he said he's well-respected police chief. His hands are tied because of these California sanctuary city and state laws. But then all of a sudden, you know, he did say, I looked at it again and I'm going to need some help. I found that very interesting. And maybe you could just walk through that. He needs some help. What's going to happen here?
Well, first of all, you got to remember, he's beholden to the mayor. And at the end of the day, I've been in the middle of a lot of these kinds of things. We had the riots here in 2020, and we should extrapolate out here. What happens is there's a Venn diagram, essentially, of different disparate leftist groups that are always activate, whether it's Gaza, whether it's bombing Tesla showrooms, whether it's BLM. They're always ready to protest. Wait until this Saturday, by the way. They got a big event coming. And so the cops know that they're there. They can't wait to get involved in there. But the politicians in California, they're all stuck in 2020. They don't realize this is not what the country voted for. I don't know. I don't really understand. You know, there's this idea that Newsom is somehow or other has this great political acumen. He's fighting yesterday's war.
He's a dopey
what the country wanted.
He has a tin political ear.
To him, this is a campaign promise. That's all it is.
Just to interrupt, Trump's right. Look, I interviewed Gavin on the show a couple weeks. I've known him for years. He's a nice fella, but he is inept, absolutely inept.
Absolutely inept.
Can I ask you a question, though? Policing-wise, shouldn't they put a curfew on? Because all the crazy people are going to come back when the sun goes down. I mean, people from all over, God knows, the West Coast, who knows, that have nothing to do with ICE and I mean, shouldn't they put a curfew
Absolutely. And in fact, we did it here in 2020. If you could get that done here, you can certainly do it under these conditions out there. And to expand the enforcement narrative a little bit, here's a name you're not hearing that's so crucial. Their version of Alvin Bragg, quote unquote, which is Nathan Hochman.
Oh.
He was elected on a law and order platform. And he's significantly better than Bragg from what I see. But he's been pretty MIA on this thing. Here's why this matters. Now that LAPD and the LA Sheriff's, the county sheriff's office is actually bigger than LAPD. Now that they're out there making arrests and enforcing, this goes into his bucket. He's the one who has to prosecute here. If he does what Bragg did, which is just let them all out, and I'm talking about the campus stuff, not 2020. The campus stuff, Bragg just lets everybody out, and then you're arresting the same people 3-4 times. And so the Venn diagram continues. Hochman now has to make these charges stick, make them feel the pain, put them in jail, make them get lawyers, and this is how you figure out who's who. This is how the feds can map the networks with the federal arrests and find out, because it's all the same people. You and I have talked about it.
No
it's
masks.
The same people.
No masks. The mask stuff, you know, I love the mask stuff. We're fighting COVID? No. They're trying to be anonymous criminals. Carolyn, here's the thing. Trump ran on this. I just want to make this point. He said, we're going to close the border, which he did. I mean, he sneezed on day one, and it stopped right there. There's nobody's cross. Now the question is deportation. In fact, the one big, beautiful bill's got some money in there to help ICE and the other border agencies for deportation. The country supports him on deportation. So far from what we've gathered informationally, ICE has arrested or taken in, I think, about 120. A lot of Mexicans, but people from Vietnam and other places, Philippines and so forth and so on. Trump's doing what he was elected to do.
Mass deportations, Larry, to your point, were a cornerstone of his campaign platform. They are wildly popular among both Republicans and Democrats. And when you were doing your opening riff, I thought, you know, a big part of this, he's just trying to keep the union together. Because California is a part of America, even though they resist with their radical policies.
I basically said that. I didn't want to be, you put it even starker terms, I don't want to refight the Civil War. But that's what.
This is not unlike Abraham Lincoln.
California is part of America.
This is not unlike what Abraham Lincoln did.
That's a great point. We should put it in the riff. I'm going to correct the riff later.
But you know, Trump, we learned from his first administration, was very deferential to the states.
Yes.
He respects the 10th Amendment. He respects federalism. He wants the states to take the lead. But he knows that Gavin Newsom has proven time and time again that he will let his cities and his state burn and erupt into chaos. And so he did what any good union leader, president, does, which is deploy the National Guard to quell the unrest. We know from history, from the Summer of Love during 2020, that they waited too long.
That's right.
And there were casualties and lives lost because of fecklessness at the state level. States can be sovereign sometimes, but the plenary power is very clearly in the domain of the federal government. It is their job, it is Trump and his administration's job to manage immigration. We know that the sanctuary cities, like California, in all the other
Chicago,
cities,
New York.
They're trying.
I mean, tough darts.
They're
Federal override. You have to preserve the union. You're absolutely right. To preserve the union. It's a Lincoln-esque statement. I'm going to put it in the riff when we publish it. Emily, I want to just come back to this point. I want Xi Jinping to watch television. And I want Vladimir Lenin to watch television. And I want the mullahs to watch television. And I want the communists in Latin America and Cuba to watch television, okay? I want them to see, A, how bad it can be, and B, how a president can come in and preserve the union. To use what Caroline is saying, I want them to see a tough, Reagan-esque law and order guy. Unfortunately, in the summer of love, 2020, President Trump did not act decisively. He did not. Now he's got, as Miranda Devine has noted, he's got guys like Homan and he's got Christie. He's got tough guys behind him, and he is acting decisively. I want the rest of the world to see this. It affects the China negotiations. It affects the Russian-Ukraine negotiations. It affects the Iranian negotiations.
And as a Californian through and through, I also remember the Watts riots. And I think there's a sense of discarding that happens at the hands of these feckless leaders that we are stuck with, including Gavin. I was a San Franciscan under his watch as mayor, and it's like we can't escape him. And my point is that there's so many, it's like, oh, that's the same neighborhood. Oh, these guys burn themselves to the ground. That's not okay. Again, the zero tolerance required to send a message that it is for all of our safety that we are bringing out the National Guard, or at least equipping the police department to do their job too. Remember, by the way, this is the same police department, LA, that bans flying the thin blue line flag. There. You can only fly it at an officer's personal desk or cubicle. You can't fly it. Yes. So we've seen in these last few years, again, that tension of the sanctuary, that who exactly are you providing sanctuary to? To your point about when the sun goes down, we've been seeing now for the past couple hours a very peaceful demonstration with masks off of union members and the like protesting something that really is not going on. And then the instant that the switch goes out, you see an absolute anarchist-based violence. Exactly. Yep. And that is for social agitation, yes, and the complete destruction of any type of law and order. That is not advocating for some kind of human principle. Because, by the way, if they were, then they would be supporting through and through the humane deportation of these individuals that have been under some of the cartels forever.
That's a great point. It is a humane deportation.
Correct.
I mean, to the point when Trump has offered them self-deportation. Right. He's offered them a plane ticket, for God's sakes. It's a better deal than they're going to get, because the thing they're going to wind up getting is they're going to be in the pokey, and they're going to hate the pokey. Whichever pokey it is, they're going to hate it. Paul Morrow, just across the tape, 4:13 p.m., 500 Marines to deploy to L.A. to protect federal property and personnel, not for law enforcement. 500 Marines. What do you make of that? Now, again, to protect that's federal buildings, I presume. Right. Because they burned the federal buildings in Seattle 5 years ago, whenever it is.
And Portland.
Portland,
too.
Portland. Actually, you know what? I meant Portland, right? I think the worst of it was
And there
Portland.
were people trapped inside as they were trying to burn it down.
So this is okay use of the Marines.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously they're going to view this as Trump upping the ante, but it goes to what you were saying, which is that leadership matters, elections have consequences, and Donald Trump is not going to lose these cities, despite the fact that a lot of these cities, I called it on another show, our cities have become the nut job archipelago. Yeah. They really have. If you look across there, you've got Chicago, New York, Philly, Baltimore, Seattle, Portland. We're losing them all. And when you look internationally, I should say, when other people around the world think of America, these are our crown jewels. These are the entry points into this country traditionally. There are centers of commerce, of culture, of legal immigrant aspiration. The stuff we all know the stories, the Ellis Islanders, and all of that. We've just completely punted on all of that and turned these places into they are realistically right now they are petri dishes of kookism.
You're right. No, the blue state cities. You're 100% right, and it's a tragic failure, and it needs to be redeveloped because, as you say, the resource potential, the opportunity potential to rebuild these cities and put people to work. Okay, whatever color. Wherever they're from, as long as they're here legally, that's what we should be doing. And the Democrats have run these cities into the ground. They're cesspools of crime and bad education and taxes. And you can't. It's a great final point. Anyway, the Marines are coming. I got to get out. Paul Morrow, thank you. Caroline Downey, Emily Compagno. Be sure to catch Emily on Outnumbered alongside her co-hosts Kayleigh McEnany and Harris Faulkner. Weekdays, 12 p.m. Eastern on Fox News. Terrific stuff.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on the Biden White House's use of the autopen and the scandal in hiding his cognitive issues. The House Oversight investigation revealed its use of the autopen was much more widespread than previously known. At least 3 different autopen signatures were used throughout the Biden presidency. They were labeled as autopen A, B, and C. The third and newly discovered version used to sign hundreds of proclamations. President Trump seeming to put a name on the autopen's face this week. Watch.
We're moving murderers out of our country that were put here by Biden or the autopen. The autopen really did. I mean, the people, whether it's Lisa Monaco or whoever operated the autopen, these are criminals. The people are criminals that allowed these criminals into our country. And I don't think that Biden knew what the hell he was doing. Many of those people that you saw on television last night are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden. And they want to stay. And we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America.
Well, it's all quite extraordinary. The House Oversight Committee is investigating the cover-up of Biden's cognitive decline as 4 former Biden aides agreed to transcribed interviews. Joining me now is the man overseeing it all, Kentucky Congressman and the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get your take on something the president said this week, and that is saying we're looking into who was in control of the autopen, whether it be Lisa Monaco or someone else. Now, Lisa Monaco, of course, was the Deputy Attorney General. What do you know about this?
Well, we know that there are sources that say that she had a big impact on making decisions as to which documents would be placed into the autopen. What we've identified first are the 4 employees that we believe manually put documents into the autopen, pressed the power button, and signed Joe Biden's name on them. Next batch of people that we're going to bring in are people like Ron Klain, and we'll get to the names that the president has mentioned as well. Everyone that we've sent notice to that we expect them to testify has agreed to testify thus far, except the doctor, and I've subpoenaed him. You can come in voluntarily, and things work out a whole lot better than if you have to come in via subpoena. So I think this investigation is progressing, and all the concerns that President Trump raised will be addressed in these transcribed interviews and depositions.
I mean, I've got the letter from 2024 from Dr. O'Connor pertaining to Joe Biden's health, and there's absolutely no mention of any cognitive decline, and there's no mention of any prostate cancer, which, of course, the Bidens released and told the public after the Robert Hur tapes were released, which was obviously a tape showing Biden's cognitive decline. I want to get your take on that and what you make of that, and also this new information that we've got that there were 3 different autopens, autopen A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's accurate. And, you know, there's more information that's coming out daily. Luckily, we have a lot of former employees like Jean-Pierre who are coming out with books and interviews that are kind of painting a picture that Joe Biden really didn't know what was going on in his White House. This is important to our investigation because there were a lot of executive orders that were signed using the autopen. There's really no excuse to use the autopen on days when you're in the White House. Many of the documents that were signed with the autopen were days that Joe Biden was actually in the White House. It's hard to explain that with respect to the doctor. If you'll remember, Joe Biden did an interview several years ago and said he had cancer. The White House quickly issued a statement saying, he misspoke. Now, how many people do you know in the history of the world that have misspoke saying they had cancer when they really didn't? So, there's evidence out there that would suggest that there's been a cover-up with respect to his cancer for many years, just based on Joe Biden's own words. So we've got a lot of evidence. There's more and more sources that are coming forward. The key to a good congressional investigation, Maria, is having whistleblowers. I don't know if you would classify Jean-Pierre and people like Buttigieg as whistleblowers, but they're issuing statements and doing interviews that are very incriminating to Joe Biden, very incriminating to Joe Biden's doctor, and raise a lot of questions as to who was authorizing the use of that autopen.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman, for 4 years, we all questioned some of these policies coming out of the White House that were so clearly anti-American. For example, leaving a wide open border and an unvetted border, rather than actually understanding and knowing who's coming into the country. Millions of gotaways, 350 people encountered on the terrorist watch list. $7 trillion in spending leading to 40-year high inflation. Do you believe that there was a group of people who were actually pushing these anti-American policies and Joe Biden was unaware of it?
I believe it's very possible. If you look at Joe Biden's career, when he was on the Senate floor, he gave speeches, encouraging a border, a tight border. He encouraged, a process to get immigration. But when he became president, just out of the blue, the autopen started signing executive orders that would allow an open border. And you have liberals in the Democrat Party that have risen the ranks through the bureaucracies here in Washington, D.C., that believe that we need to fundamentally change the appearance of America, that America's too white, that we need more immigrants to come in. We need more people that would end up being registered Democrats. That's a fact. So the possibility is there that there were deep state bureaucrats in the White House that were just using that autopen to sign major legislation and major executive orders that Joe Biden had no knowledge of and never would have supported if you look at his previous 3 decades of public service.
No, that's just incredible. I mean, just to be clear, I think most people would say they support lots of diversity and different ethnicities in America. What I'm really talking about is an unvetted situation in a world where China is on the march, Iran is on the march, and Russia is invading countries. You want to know that there aren't terrorists coming in, and you've got 350 people on the terrorist watch list who were encountered at the open border. But let me switch gears and get your take on what's happening this morning and this week. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz all testifying today about their immigration and sanctuary policies and how they've affected Americans. Mr. Chairman, you're leading the hearing. What shall we expect here?
Well, we're going to see where these governors stand on whether or not they're going to work with the Trump administration to deport the criminal illegals. What we have found is there are sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. The 3 governors who will be present today represent 3 of those states that have openly objected and disrupted Tom Homan and the Homeland Security and ICE's efforts to deport the criminal illegals. They're not sharing information. They're not cooperating with ICE in the deportation of the criminal illegals. This is very serious. We believe this is a crime if they do not cooperate with the federal authorities. The American people spoke with respect to the border and with respect to deporting the criminal illegals. This is President Trump's agenda. He campaigned on it. He was very transparent. He's done a very good job of securing the border. The next phase is deporting the bad guys that got across the border while Joe Biden was president, and we found that there's opposition in these 3 states to that effort to deport those criminal illegals. So we're going to talk about that today. It'll probably be about a 7-hour committee hearing. Hopefully we'll get answers, and hopefully this will give the Trump administration direction on how to move forward in these 3 states.
All right, we'll be watching your work. Congressman, good to see you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.